On air, here we are. Welcome to Australian Search Marketing Academy for the Australian search marketing community. I'm Peter Mead, and today we're talking about optimizing WordPress for bloggers. We have a very special guest, Markee, who has helped many of the world's top bloggers with their WordPress sites. And we've been communicating a little bit here and talking about the fact that kangaroos sometimes do jump down the main street, but which Casey was quite interested in. Casey,
Yes,
you're
very.
in San Diego.
That is correct. America's greatest city, as they call it, supposedly. A very, very nice, beautiful day here, a little over 70 degrees. We do not have any kangaroos or foxes jumping down the streets. I was fascinated when I was looking up a little bit about Melbourne. Again, I have not had the honor of visiting Australia at all, and I was just shocked when I found that you guys are known as the fox capital of the world. You apparently have all these foxes that just run around everywhere, and I'm thinking, very interesting. We don't have that. We have coyotes occasionally, and they are not as much fun. So very interesting to read about that.
Absolutely. Differences there with obviously the other side of the world. But so Casey, thanks again for joining us. And look, I usually start these webinars by asking our guest, just a very quick question. What's hot in SEO right now? What's going on? What's happening?
Well, I tell you what, if there's been a lot of volatility in the search engine rankings, especially over the last several months, that of course started back in March when we had the core update, March the 11th. It accelerated even more back in June when Google reran the core algorithm, possibly with other changes. That was on June the 3rd. We've heard a lot about that. I know that others on your calls have talked about that. But what many people might not be aware of is that there was yet another update, and this seems to be a significant one that happened on or about June the 27th. So late last week. On the positive, it seems that a lot of people, especially a lot of bloggers specifically, were positively impacted by this. So if you're on the call and you're thinking, I seem to have a pretty good weekend, go back, take a look at June the 27th, run an analysis and see if you notice any uptick. And of course, unfortunately as well, there has to be some losers as well. So see if you notice any downticks as well. And we'll see what we can see. There's not much to say about that, so I'm not going to regale you with any findings because there's nothing to say. I am collecting some data, so if you were positively impacted by that, good for you. And we'll see what we see. But as I tell bloggers all the time, SEO is a marathon, not a race, it's not a sprint. Sometimes these algorithm updates benefit you, and many times, unfortunately, they hurt you. So it's a zero-sum game. We just hope that we can stay ahead of all the changes positively long term.
Absolutely. The sprint, this whole idea of trying to get fast results, I see that a lot, and we see people really getting hurt. I mean, going backwards by sort of taking shortcuts or maybe taking a few risks, I guess.
Sure.
Which I saw a lot of that from the June 3 update. Yeah, seen quite a bit of that. Still people reeling from that one.
Yeah, and I all I would add on that is that if you're on the call and you've suffered fallout from these updates, and I know that they exist, and I know many of you, I can recognize some of the names, you probably did suffer fallout from the March update, and unfortunately, maybe you didn't get any recovery from the June update. It can be discouraging. Totally get it. One of the things that you really want to ask yourself, though, is, am I going to continue to read all this information, or am I going to go ahead and seek out the help from a possible professional who can do a competent site audit on your site to maybe diagnose and provide you a list of priority items to check? One of the things that I really want to emphasize is that you don't know what you don't know. Trust me, my wife tells me it all the time. Very, very common. It's a stenciled glass in the Markee household. You need to work with professionals. There's a lot of top bloggers who were negatively impacted by the June update. Negatively impacted initially in March, did not receive any recovery in June. Now they're finally realizing, this is my livelihood, I need to seek out professionals. And so myself, Alan Bleiweiss, I know Peter, yourself, others have been slammed with requests for help, professional help, auditing assistance from these sites who are negatively impacted. And I urge you on the call, if you can do that, seek out a second pair of eyes. Have someone who can go in, crawl your site, who can look at the topical clusters, who can look and see, okay, well, it's clear to me that Google's having a hard time algorithmically scoring your content based upon usability barriers here, here, and here. And oh, by the way, you're showing 20 ads on this recipe page. Maybe we want to dial that back a little bit. So it's okay to ask for help. This is your livelihood. This is a business. Just as I tell everyone to invest in the best hosting they can, just as I tell everyone that they should try to sign up for a block support plan because WordPress is not optimized out of the box, which I always think is pretty funny when people say that. We want to have you, give you the best chance of recovering from issues like this, and that involves you putting out a lifeline and having someone help you. It's okay. We can only do so much on these seminars.
Yeah, absolutely, Casey. Can I just also add to that and say it's also important for people to be considerate about who they ask for help, because we've seen it time and time again where perhaps, whether it be a blogger or someone who needs that help and they reach out for help, and then perhaps they don't make the best choice of who it is that helps them. And doing all kinds of things, like recently we've seen a lot of, I think there's been a lot of going on with the June 3 update where it comes to, they're a lot better at picking out those really poor link signals. Especially things like, from PBNs, the private blog network links, things like that are linking from irrelevant PBNs back to the homepage of the website, where in the past they may have gotten away with it. They've obviously engaged a professional to do this kind of work. I would say, please, please, please think carefully about who you get to help, because we do see a lot of that work, which can also cause problems.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. So I guess that brings up a good point. And Peter, I'm sure you have some great thoughts on this. How do you determine who is competent and who is not? I mean, there's one of the criticisms of SEO in general is that there's no standards division. You have to basically rely on recommendations or referrals, or you have to vet that professional. Now, there are a lot of people in our niche who, maybe they do podcasts, maybe they publish a book, maybe they publish an article, maybe they offer a course. They couldn't find a bad link from a hole in the wall. It's just that's just not their forte. They're great at talking about SEO, but they might not necessarily know how to audit a site effectively. So I always look on referrals. When we talk about word of mouth, I've been very fortunate. I never advertise. I don't advertise. If someone is interested in an audit, it's a 100% referral business from someone who's at an existing audit, or a referral from someone in the niche who's like, hey, I know Casey Markee. He does a lot of work with food, lifestyle, and do-it-yourself bloggers. He might be someone that can assist you. But if you're asking yourself, where does help exist? Go on some of these forums, ask for referrals, and then vet those people accordingly. Pop their names into Google, see if they can back up what they're saying. If they're published somewhere, if they, go to their Facebook page where they're going to have dozens, if not hundreds, of feedbacks and referrals there. Look at their LinkedIn report. Yeah. And I know you've seen that ourselves. I mean, one of the things that you and I have done historically is correct the mistakes of other SEOs.
That's right.
That's a very common issue that we run into, and unfortunately it's a bad issue, and we continue to hope that it'll improve, and unfortunately it never does. So
that's exactly right. But no, you're right about getting referrals. Also some of the user groups, maybe some of the local SEO meetups around, figure out that sort of thing. But referrals, and also do your own background checks on those people. But referral from a trusted source is always good. Shall we jump into some of these questions?
Absolutely, there's some good ones. Good ones submitted.
How about, I'll go through the first one here, Casey. We've got one from Megan, and we got Megan, that's Mad Creations Hub, I think she's from. So the question is, I would love to know best hosting for an Aussie blog. Still wanting speed and responsiveness for my Aussie audience, but also international as well. So yes, hosting, right? It's a huge deal for making your site run faster, performance and also reliability. And
Yeah.
I mean, do you work with some Aussie bloggers, Casey? What would you say about the quality of hosting for Aussie as well as international?
Well, I've heard very good things about Kinsta, and I'm going to go ahead and paste over the link here. Kinsta is pretty nice. It's based in Sydney, I believe. It uses Google Cloud, very similar to the makeup that WP Engine uses. But here's the good news: it's one third the cost of WP Engine, so pretty nice. I definitely recommend it. Anything that's in the cloud, I'm all for. I think traditional, regular servers in a server room are kind of meeting the end of their usefulness in many ways. That's what I would look at first is Kinsta. So if you're familiar, if you're in Australia specifically and you want something that actually has global appeal, quality CDN options as well, so we can keep those copies all around the world, Kinsta would be a good recommendation.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that sounds pretty good. I mean, I would also throw my hat in the ring and say WP Engine as well. I mean, we have a good
WP
good track
Engine is well
record.
known. Yeah, WP Engine's well known. They just bought. Who did they just buy there, Peter? They just bought SiteGround. Is that right or no? Was it? No, it wasn't SiteGround. Who was it? No,
Sounds,
Fly Engine. Or
yeah, okay.
no, not
Right.
what is it? Fire. It's Fly. Something Fly. Totally name escapes
Yeah.
me, but anyway.
No,
Yeah.
I'd be,
WP Engine is great. I tell you what though, horrible pricing. For the average blogger out there, don't recommend it because you can buy something that's cloud based as well. Heck, you could even go AWS with Amazon and pay in many cases 2/3 of what you would be paying for the same setup on WP Engine. So unless you're a blogger with 500 or 1 million sessions a month, which most
costing,
of you on the call probably are not, go
yeah.
with the better performance and see what you can do. So hopefully that'll help you out.
Yeah,
Flywheel.
so
Yes, it was
that's a
Flywheel. So
good,
WP Engine. Thank you for our attendees who said that Flywheel was just purchased by WP Engine. So for
oh
those of
yeah.
you who are using Flywheel, congratulations. Your hosting will probably go up about 150%. So great job.
We've got a question here from Emily, steamandbake.com. And so she's saying, I'd like to know what's the best practice SEO is for titling recipe blog where I'm giving 2 different methods for the cooking recipe. So it looks like, yeah, so there's a long question here. I'll just keep going.
Okay.
Many posts contain recipes which detail both a regular cooking. Okay, so it looks like she's getting a problem here. Don't want to end up with duplicate content. And just saying, I don't want to be restricted to just steam oven searches as it's a really niche market with a low traffic volume, but it is my specialty area. So she's saying, I wonder if I'm doing a disservice to my post by attempting to rank for general traffic as well as my own tiny niche. Should she just stick to her niche and do the one type, or what?
Well, that's a good
Go
question.
broader.
Let's unpack that a little bit. So in her case here, she's talking about she has a recipe that has 2 preparation methods. It's regular oven cooking, and an adapted steam oven cooking method as well. I would look specifically at which of those methods is more common, and then I would go ahead and focus the recipe on that. But I would also go ahead and have a section in the post where, by the way, there is an alternative method by which we can prepare this, and we can go ahead and put both of those preparation methods in the recipe card. Not a problem at all. Matter of fact, we see that all the time. There's many cases where someone might have a rotisserie and a oven method for a various recipe. We can easily accumulate and we can easily accommodate both of those methods within the recipe card. People tend to worry about cannibalization. I certainly wouldn't. I tell you what I wouldn't do, which is what I wouldn't have a whole post devoted to each cooking method, because you're going to run into internal cannibalization issues. There's just not enough unique content there to make that worthwhile. So definitely one long exhaustive post that uses both of those methods, definitely the way to go.
Yeah, okay. That's a good advice right there. Thank you for that. So here we have Tanya Boylan. So I've got one here. Here's a question from Tanya. How many variations of a keyword or a keyword phrase should we be using in one post? How can you increase the number of keywords that you rank for within a single post? So he's got an example, i.e., can you spread keywords throughout the text of the post, or do you have to use them in H2 headers for them to be able to rank? And what's the most glaring? I'll just leave. That's two questions in one
Yeah,
there.
we'll
So
just do that first one
might
there.
just do the first bit there. What do you think, Casey? I mean, do they need? You know, if I think it sounds to me like maybe getting too hung up on these keywords so far as wanting to put them into H2 headers and things. Obviously, your primary topic will be important to make sure that that is focused. But variations of the keyword, in my experience, it should be naturally written into the post in a way that makes sense when people read it.
Yeah.
And you will rank for keywords, sometimes keywords that are not even in the post at
Yeah,
all.
and that's very true. So if you, one of the things that I would urge you to, for the person who submitted this question and for everyone on the call, is to really not worry so much about what keywords you're going to rank for and trying to optimize a post for everything, but just try to optimize for the user. We should have a focus keyword, maybe 2 focus keywords if you're using Yoast, or if you upgrade to Yoast Premium, fantastic way for you to specify multiple focus keywords. Go ahead and delve down into making sure that the post is optimized for 1 or 2 keywords at the most. But when you do that, you are literally going to open yourself up to dozens, if not hundreds, of long tail keyword matches. That's why you can have a super post on your site. We call them content unicorns, where they rank for basically everything you can possibly think of, and you had no idea that this keyword was even in the content. Maybe it isn't even in the content. Maybe it's from an internal link from another post. Maybe it's an external link signal by means of anchor text. Don't get hung up on the number of keywords that the post is ranking for. Focus in finitely. Can I go ahead and optimize this for 1 or 2 keywords? And when you do that, you're going to find that through what's called keyword stemming, you're going to do extremely well. The long tail keywords are going to click in. You can then go into Search Console, pull up that post, click on the keywords tab, and you can see right away a whole list of keywords that Google is auto-populating for that post. And then, maybe you can see a couple keywords on there that have some volume, but you're not generating a lot of traffic. Well, then we can go back to the post with that data now that we have it, and maybe we can go ahead and look at optimizing the content a little bit more around some of those other keyword phrases that Google is now showing you as algorithmically scoring on, but you're not competitive for. So I would reverse your model. Let's go ahead and focus in on a couple keywords, then go back in a couple months, take a look at what you're ranking for, and then see if we can go ahead and dial it in for a little bit more success.
Yeah, absolutely. The opportunities will come if you, you can see those opportunities. Go have a look in your Google Search Console data and see which keywords are coming in, and then have a look where they fit, topically where they fit, and then start building them in. So there's another part of that question here, which there's the big question everyone wants to know: what's the most glaring SEO error in Google's eyes? Shall we shall we hit on that one, Casey?
Sure. Yeah.
How do you answer that? What's the biggest?
Well, I don't
glaring
know what the most
error?
glaring SEO issue in Google's eyes is, because Google will tell you that everything's an issue for them, page speed, whatever. But Google will probably tell you it's page speed, because their goal is a bottom line, seamlessly loading interweb. That's what their biggest issue is page speed. And so if you're running ads and Google would like every page on the internet to load in less than 2 seconds, basically impossible if you're running any sort of ads. But we could certainly get that under maybe 7 or 8 seconds if you optimize accordingly. So if you're on the call and you're asking, what should we hone on to fix on a site first? I would definitely choose page speed, because page speed involves so many linked variables. It's user experience, it's page design, it's how many elements you are stuffing or stifling the page with. If you can run your page through Page Speed Insights and get somewhere, don't even worry about the score, worry about the metrics. If you've got a first contentful paint metric is under 2.4 seconds, that's what I'm looking at. Faster the better. I'm looking at a speed index of less than 6 or 7 seconds at the most, and I'm looking for a time to interactive of, again, on a WordPress site, probably 7 to 8 seconds. And frankly, if you're not running ads, it should be much faster than that at a minimum. So if you're running, if you're putting a post through a site and I'm looking at page speed insights and I'm getting a 35, 40, 50, 60 plus second time to interactive, don't expect to be competitive. Don't ask yourself, because if think about that. And one of the ways I say it, Peter, is like, think about the time to interactive. That's like how many seconds it takes to fully load the page. Imagine just cutting that in half. Right? Yeah, imagine just cutting that in half. Imagine now we got twice as many people able to access that content in 1 minute. I mean, imagine taking a 40-second plus load time and knocking it down to 10 seconds. Wow, you've literally increased the chances of users interacting with your content by a factor of 3. So when we talk about making your content more attractive and we talk about glaring SEO errors, I have literally dozens and dozens of examples where we have done nothing but improve the page speed on the client side and the traffic has gone up noticeably. So we want to really make it easy for Google to crawl and algorithmically score our content. And if they're timing out, they're not able to do that effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add a little bit onto that about the be careful, because a lot of people, they have their responsive version of the theme, and if you're going to use the Google Page Speed Insights tool, you'll see the difference between the mobile and the desktop. And I guess sometimes it's not so easy to diagnose what is actually happening on that responsive version of the theme that's making it run that much slower. So again, it's a chance there to dive in, or even to get a professional to help diagnose what is actually going on. It's very often that it runs slower on mobile than it does on a desktop, that I have seen.
And that's very true. I mean, we can talk very quickly about stacks. I mean, we always have these questions about, oh my God, I'm on WordPress and I'm just slow. Well, you're either slow, you're usually slow because of a lack of optimization. If we're auditing a WordPress site, one of the very first things we're going to be looking at is your bottom line hosting. Do I have a very fast server response? Do I have enough resources to handle not only my resources, but also projected traffic? Very simple, having a tier 1 server. If you're on the call and you're hosting with Bluehost, HostGator, or some of these other lower tier hosting services, they're known for their micro outages, literally hundreds and hundreds of micro outages every month. And what's a micro outage? Well, your site might only be down for 10 or 15 seconds, but it's happening over and over again, or maybe a couple seconds, and that's going to hurt your attractiveness when we talk about Google algorithmic consideration. So when we're looking at diagnosing a site and we're thinking, okay, how can we work on this page speed? Invest in quality hosting, invest in quality caching plugins. Whether I personally like WP Rocket, but there are plenty other great options. I'm sure Peter can recommend some. Invest in bulk image optimization. Weebly. Many of you are familiar with Google pushing the new alternative image formats. Weebly is one of them, WEBP. It's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to do that because, Safari doesn't support that format. Guys, you know how many people use Safari? Almost no one. Yeah. Seriously. If your concern is that, oh my God, my Safari users aren't going to be happy because I'm now converting all my images to next gen, don't lose any sleep over it. I mean, I'm serious. If I'm able to convert all the images to Weebly and all of a sudden the page goes from 11 seconds to 6, you know what? I'm going to be okay with a little bit of dissatisfaction from Safari until they catch up, and they will catch up. They're basically the only browser out there that doesn't support these new next-gen images, and they'll eventually get around to it. So invest in the quality image optimization, invest in a quality caching plugin. That's all you really need to do. That's where it starts.
Nice. Let's go to Maria. So Maria is the Let the Baking Begin blog. And so how do you figure out your ranking and what kind of keyword search volume you should be aiming for when trying to optimize a post? It's a little bit similar to the previous question, a little bit of a different thing there. How do you figure out your ranking and what kind of keyword search volume? Obviously, there's some tools. There's lots of different tools around. What are your recommendations there, Casey? What should we be doing to figure this out?
Well, there's a lot of rank checkers out there, but I always tell people to start with what they have access to for free, and that's everyone on the call, and that's Search Engine Console. So you have the ability to go into Search Engine Console and to see where you're ranking competitively for a lot of keywords. Now, a lot of people are confused by these average rankings, but there's information on there. You just have to search for it so you can understand how to read that data. As a matter of fact, gosh, Peter, you know, I'm trying to think of his name here, Glenn Gabe. Glenn Gabe, you know him pretty well. He's he had a fantastic guide published in Search Engine Land about, you know, I think it was early last year, about how to read the search metrics, the search ranking positions in Search Console. That should be a must read for everyone on the call. Start there. This is free. And then go ahead and see, okay, Google's ranking me for this content here. I have a very weak site. Maybe I don't have more than a couple dozen linking domains or a couple hundred linking domains. If you're finding that you're targeting a keyword that has 20, 50, 100,000 searches a month, probably going to find that you're running into competitive headaches because there's a lot of bigger sites above you that are targeting that keyword phrase. You might not have the earned authority yet or even the strength to rank competitively for that. Contrary to popular belief, someone with 10 ranking domains is going to have a hard time ranking for, you know, banana cream pie right out of the gate. It's not going to work. There's too much competition for that, and you have to earn that competition. So as I tell everyone all the time when we're doing these audits, you kind of have to find your sweet spot. For most bloggers, that's 2,000 to 12,000 searches a month initially. And then occasionally you'll have a home run where you'll eventually rank for a keyword or two that's 30, 40, 50,000 sessions. And that will help push up your site algorithmically, and you can start to rank a little bit more for other longer tail or other high volume keyword phrases. So it's one of those things where, lots of stuff that can be do. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you could go. I mean, Google Search Console, absolutely. Everyone who has a blog, who has WordPress, they should be familiarizing themselves with Google Search Console and really learning how to read the data and how it works. But it's also, you can go further than that, because then if you have an account, let's say you have an Semrush account, obviously we're talking about Semrush, but there's other tools as well that do this, but they will help you to get an understanding of your competitiveness, like who is your competitor and who else is actually ranking. I mean, you can do this too by just going straight to Google, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Dropping that keyword in and finding out, who is actually dominating the space for those keywords. A tool like Semrush, is probably going to shortcut that process. So I would say there's lots of ways of doing it, but there's probably I think the real kind of thing that I would say is spend the time understanding the keywords. Who are your competitors? The big bear on the hill, you're not going to knock them off straight away if you're just beginning, but you have to start somewhere, and so you still need to keep working in your niche and keep working hard.
All right, what's moving on here? So we've got what's our next question there?
We're going here from Diane Williams, and this is Homemade Food Junkie. Please explain the benefits of using Gutenberg. I've just started using it this month. I like it actually, and think it may improve SEO. For example, the image links are now correct according to my Semrush content editor. So that was not the case in the classic editor. Other benefits I'm not seeing, question mark. What do you think? Gutenberg, obviously, this is a radical change for WordPress.
Right,
the editor
very
is
radical.
completely different, and we're now working in blocks, content blocks, the whole DOM model, document object model. There's some technical things that really have changed fundamentally with this. What do you see so far as bloggers are concerned, Casey? What would you say that is the benefit of them using Gutenberg?
Well, I tell you, it's been change is hard. Change is hard. It's like me trying to have more than one salad a week. Very, very tough for me to do, especially considering I tend to load that salad up with a lot of bacon bits. So moving to Gutenberg was tough, and it's one of those things where a lot of bloggers are still using the classic editor. And hey, I'm one of them. I'm not a fan, honestly, of the block segment.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough to change. Will I eventually switch over? Yes, and I can tell you that I have to know the editor because I have dozens and dozens of clients who have made the move. So positives of Gutenberg. It's easier to use blocks to add schema. That's a big deal. So right now you have blocks that are built specifically around various schemas, which have taken off in 2019. The two most prominent being how-to and FAQ schema, which Google is now supporting fully and pushing radically in the SERPs, both desktop and mobile. So that is very easy to use if you're using Gutenberg. We can just go ahead and pull in a how-to or FAQ block. It looks like item list schema, super easy to use, fantastic. You also have blocks for basically everything. You've got your paragraph, your heading, your subheading, the gallery, a cover image, quotes, columns, lists, videos, you name it, embeds. They're all with blocks, so it's very WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I am not technically sound. Clearly, I'm not a coder, never have been. Funny story, actually, but we won't get into it today. I took coding in college. It did not end well. Needless to say, my robot basically committed seppuku. He killed himself before he could even complete the assigned trials he was supposed to do in front of the class. Good times. So the block editor, again, has its benefits. There's lots that you can do with it. Here are the detriments. It can lead to decreased site performance, substantially decreased site performance, because you will have all these blocks. You'll load in a bunch of blocks that add a bunch of plugins that'll add 2 to 20 blocks each. And the next thing you know, you've got all these blocks that are slowing down performance. You really have to be cautious and very judicious about how you're going to be using these blocks in the future to keep them out. And remember that when you have each of these blocks, each of the blocks are loading CSS and JavaScript all the time on every page, whether you're using that block or not, folks. That's how it works. Your site will slow down considerably. Now, version 2 of the block editor is coming, but I don't believe it's going to be released this year, where they're looking to address a lot of these performance issues. But one of the things you might want to consider is trying to be a little bit proactive on that and consider something like WP Asset Cleanup, which is a fantastic plugin that allows you to defer. And I believe, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but it will work on the blocks. It will allow you to defer unused blocks from needlessly loading on a lot of pages. So that might be something that you'd want to take a look at using specifically, and I'll go ahead and paste that over. So I'm going to go ahead and paste over that into the chat. And then, Peter, if you have some thoughts to add on that, let me know. But I mean, I'm sure we all know Gutenberg's the future, but maybe the future isn't right now.
It's the future, that's right. I mean, these things obviously take time to settle in, but we often see changes in WordPress that are not necessarily going to help performance. I mean, as you said, each time there's a block, there's more CSS, there's more JavaScript. Lots of themes are doing this as well. Every time with your themes, you use the editor, and they're using these blocks to build things, and it's loading resources, it's loading to the load stack. It's time, and we know that time is money, right? When it comes to how slow your page loads. So, Gloria, I'll just go on here, Casey, to the next question. Gloria Dugan, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's from Homemade and Yummy, and the question here is there any SEO benefit to backdate a post, then republish it at a later date to bring it forward? Does Google find this confusing? Well, we know there's a bit of a tactic there about refreshing content and changing the publish date.
So what she's referring to the fact that used to be a very popular way for you to also better optimize for Pinterest. So basically you could backdate the post, have it go live on Pinterest, but then you could go ahead and not have it show on the homepage until a later date. I'm against it. No SEO benefit in doing this at all. And SEO, and here's the thing, is that John Mueller has actually commented on this, and he says he wants to see a date on everything, and that date needs to be valid. So I'm going to go ahead and paste over a tweet from him on that. And they're really big about, Google does not like it when you artificially change or update dates for a non-user benefit, and there is no user benefit to that. And I'm going to go ahead and paste over the citation on that. Great. So here's the thing too, is that if you do this, folks, you can possibly get penalized, because you could lose the date from showing up as a byline completely. And I've seen this physically myself, and it's something that's been around for about a year and a half. So there's a couple citations on that. You can take a look, but I just wouldn't do it. There's just no reason. It used to be that a lot of bloggers felt that they needed to optimize for Pinterest literally months in advance. So like it's July right now. We need to start optimizing for our fall content right now. I don't believe at all that that is even remotely necessary anymore with how fast Pinterest and how fast everything else has moved. I've told bloggers over and over again in my audits that, hey, if you want to optimize for your fall content for Pinterest, hey, go ahead and start in the fall. You'll be fine. It's not going to take you months to build traffic for this. There's way, it's just not necessary. We don't need that much lead time anymore. It's like bloggers who are like, oh my gosh, I have a St. Patrick's Day recipe. I better start publishing that in February so that it has a chance to rank competitively in later this year. We don't need to do that. Google crawls content in minutes, hours at the most on most sites. Very occasionally, I might see a blog post that takes a couple days now. But if it's more than that, I'm always very surprised. So don't feel the need that you need to pre-burn or preload this content weeks or months later than necessary, because Google's going to find the content, algorithmically score it very quickly, and it's going to slowly work its way up. And that's going to happen in hours and days, not weeks and months.
Yeah, absolutely. The crawler, I mean, put it this way, if it's taking too long for your content to appear, then I would be asking questions about what you can do, I guess, to allow Google to crawl your site better, because it really shouldn't take that long. But of course, I get what you're saying about the Pinterest, this sort of thing. I know the thinking, trying to get ahead of the game. Let's go on, because here's a really interesting one. Of course, schema is such a big deal now to get it right, and it can easily be gotten wrong. So Carlos has got a question here. What is the best way, whether it's manually or using a plugin, to manage schema on WordPress and avoiding the common technical issues about incomplete organizational schema or the not useful schema code? That's the question. So yeah, I know you had some thoughts here, Casey, around the whole schema topic, and in particular, what's happened with Yoast recently. Things can go wrong with schema. And what are your thoughts here on this one?
So let's talk a little bit about that specifically. So starting with Yoast 11.0, Yoast decided that it was their God-given right to start serving schema to everyone, regardless of whether you wanted it or not. So they're going to take over schema in the Yoast plugin for most sites. Well, that caused a lot of consternation and downright dissent online, especially for anyone who is using a theme that already had schema built in. Genesis is a prime example of that. So you had to come out and install a plugin that basically disabled all the built-in Genesis schema so that you could get all the Yoast embedded schema to work. Now, I can see the logic for that, because it might be better to have your plugin take advantage of most schema as opposed to coding it into a theme, which in many cases is not updated regularly and can be outdated quite a bit and has poor support in many cases. So I could see why Yoast decided to do that. And this was something that W3T, that they got, buy-in from the consortium. They wanted this to do. This is this is an accepted way to go do this. And so people are like, darn Yoast. Oh, get off my lawn, Yoast. But what happened was that, even though they're upset with it, Yoast isn't doing anything that people didn't see coming. So if you're on the call and you're upset about this, hey, I get it. But this is, again, the future. It's just like the stupid Gutenberg editor. Now, because Yoast has decided to do so much, they've had growing pains. So what's happened is, if you didn't choose the correct type of schema on your blog, you immediately started throwing up errors site-wide. And fortunately, they're mostly easy fixes. So if you're a blogger and you're operating under a name, use the name. Go ahead and switch to organization schema. Go ahead and put your site name. Go ahead and load up a 300 by 300 or larger logo there, square logo, under knowledge panel, so that we can go ahead and eliminate those errors right away. And one of the really interesting things is that every time Yoast does an update, it seems like there's another little error that you have to patch. And the most recent one involved the name attribute. It happened when you're nesting article and recipe schema and article and other schemas like Yoast is doing, it can result in a lot of errors. And the most recent one was a name specific error. And it's funny because that name specific error was only happening because blogs had disabled their author archives. Very funny. I couldn't even tell you why that's happening. But once you enabled the author archives and then no indexed those same archives, in other words, choose no and not show them in search, immediately cleared the errors. So very funny stuff. So if you're on the call and if you're taking one of your pages and you're popping them into the structured data tool and you're seeing some errors and you're like, man, what is going on? Why do I have this name error? Why do I have those logo errors? This is why. So you can go ahead and correct the organizational schema, go ahead and go back to your author archives, click enable and no index, and it'll clear those errors pretty quickly.
Well, that's a great bit of advice there for a quick fix. So we'll keep trying to move through these questions. I mean, so far as just going back to so far as plugins, I mean, there's stacks of plugins.
Stacks.
You can just Google for them. I mean, are they any better than others? I just I think
it's
it
all
becomes a bit of a preference. Yeah, it's a preference thing. Let's go. Corey Wolf. So Corey Wolf, he runs the Adelaide Digital Marketing Meetup group. And so Corey has a question here. This is about are LSI keywords still important for SEO when blogging? And what do you think about TF, IDF? Is it just fancy ISI or something, or should we all be doing, fancy LSI or something we should all be doing? So TF, IDF, and LSI, well, there's some acronyms there. Is everybody...
Right. Let's go ahead and define those for the rest of you who might not be aware of this. So LSI stands for latent semantic indexing. And it's basically, in essence, it finds the hidden or latent relationships between words or semantics in order to improve information understanding, indexing. So that's why you have the latent semantic indexing. It's one of the simplest ways to explain it. The proposition is that for the blogger, regular blogger, you could go ahead and use LSI. You could basically include synonyms for your target keywords within a piece of content, and that will kind of help Google better algorithmically score the content. That's the most simplistic way for me to explain LSI. However, if you talk to people much smarter than me, and there are a lot of them, Bill Slosky is one of them, he will tell you that they don't use it, and they haven't used it in years. So he has a great resource where he talks about it in a little bit. And, again, spoiler, he says Google's not using it. And I tell you, he's very convincing in his argument. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that over here, and you could take a look at that specifically. But let's go ahead and move to the second one, which is about the TF-IDF algo. And that's short for term frequency inverse document frequency. And it measures the importance of a keyword phrase by comparing it to the frequency of the term in a large set of documents, or what's called a corpus. Okay. And again, folks, I don't like to be this technical at all. So I just want you to understand that basically how it's used, it's a way to measure the importance of keyword phrases in relation to other phrases on the page in an overall corpus of documents. And this is also one of those things where there is no reliable tool out there that the average SEO can use to do this, because even Google says we use this on such a large level that there's no way that the average SEO provider or person could even remotely be able to use TF-IDF to understand how we use this at scale. So one of the things that you kind of want to understand is that I always go back to Google on this. So if you go back to Google, John Mueller had a hangout on 420, and I'm going to go ahead and paste over the link here. Well worth your time for those of you who are unfamiliar with these terms or want to read a little bit more about it. And here's what he said. And he said this was his general recommendation, which is that my general recommendation here is not to focus on things like artificial metrics. You understand what he says when he says artificial metrics. It's something where on the one hand, you can't produce the metric directly, and we can't overall, for example, use testing to even test the results. it's not that you can kind of like say, well, this is what I need to do, because you don't really have that metric overall. In other words, bottom line, he's basically saying it's impossible for site owners and SEOs to calculate TF-IDF because it's based on the statistics of the entire web. Okay, so if your question, Corey, is how important are these metrics, I would say that for the average site owner, they're not important at all. And I'm a big believer in that. So I'm going to go ahead and paste over that quote a little bit from Google and see what you can do. I know that this is a long one, so it might not even paste over. Yeah, okay. Terrible. We'll get into that. So I guess the question is, well, what should you be focusing on instead? And one of the things that we ask is that it's basically a lot of people, again, much smarter than me, including Mike King of iPullRank, they did put together a guide on an ultimate guide to TF-IDF content optimization. And I'll go ahead and paste that over. Yeah. You can read through this a little bit, but bottom line is that it's just not really useful for the average site owner. Yeah. Go ahead and paste that over here. And then, of course, in my mind, if you're looking on what we should be concentrating on from a factor standpoint, if you haven't seen it, Cyrus Shepard had a fantastic post on Google success factors, and it was published on zippy.com several months ago. It's a great breakdown of what the important factors are, what the non-important factors on, and what the factors which are a complete waste of your damn time are. And it's definitely a must read for anyone on this call, be it you're a blogger, an SEO, or the like. I'm going to go ahead and paste that over. So yeah, right. When we talk about what we should be looking at for keyword research and SEO, I think you're going to be more inclined to worry about things like topic modeling, what keywords, competitive nature. Maybe we're looking at other ways to approach keyword research by using semantic analysis. Maybe we're looking at sentiment analysis, because there's always a different focus on each of the keyword types, whether it's transactional or behavioral or the like. So on that note, I'll go ahead and paste over one of a recent presentation by Bill Slosky. Again, he's covered this in detail.
Great. Thank you for pasting all those links, Casey. They're very helpful. Folks can look them up and read some more. Of course, we'd be here until the cows come home, or until the foxes come out, if we were to go into all those details, right?
Exactly. I wish there was a simple answer, and that was, and my hat's off to Corey. That's a very good question, and I wish that I could provide a definite, a definite answer to that. But in my experience, focusing on the page level as much as possible is great, but I've yet to find a competent tool, and there are several out there, and they're in the article that I've linked to, that provides a good job with regards to using those metrics specifically to determine competitive nature of keywords in relation to other keywords.
Got another question here from Sally Mills. Sally Mills from Brisbane. She organizes the Brisbane SEO Beers event, where they
actually beers are involved.
Beers are involved in the evening.
Okay. Well, I'm officially your best friend. I'm officially your best friend, so you don't even need to say anything else. Just go ahead and give her my email address, and she can paste whatever questions she wants to go straight to my inbox. All good.
Yeah. And when you come over to visit at some stage, you
hopefully.
So the question here is from Sally. Is of course the question is, with many plugins slowing down the website, it's hard to decide which one is most appropriate to do a change or to hard code the change. The question here is, what is your favorite SEO plugin for WordPress? With the arrival of Rank Math, do you think that this is a competitor to the Yoast plugin? And how do you manage the plugins? By default, creating of 2 URLs to the blog when it's in 2 categories, canonical issues, that sort of thing, which you can do with Yoast. Can help to handle that sort of thing. So I guess maybe we'll go back to the bulk of the question here about Rank Math. I don't know what I actually I'm sort of a bit of a habit guy. I mean, you stick back a winning horse. I mean, Yoast has been in the game for a long time. I'm still using Yoast, and I haven't tried Rank Math myself, so I'm not sure. Have you tried Rank Math, Casey?
I have, and I think it's fine, but there's also a you could tend to do too much. And
Mm.
SEO Presser is another one. SEO
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Presser and Rank Math both suffer from the same issue, which is feature overload. You do
Mm.
not need, as an average blogger, to have that many features in a plugin because you are going to have analysis paralysis. And I can tell you that I've
Mm.
seen it in practice multiple times from bloggers who've come to me and said, oh, well, I was using this and it told me to do this and I did this, and all of a sudden my blog tanked or my post didn't rank well, or, oh my gosh, it's telling me to get to an 88, but then if I do this, I got to 93, but I didn't really see any difference.
Yeah.
You need to find a process that works well for you. I'm a big believer in Yoast. Again, I don't get paid for that opinion. Trust me, at all.
Yeah.
Wish I did. And a lot of people were very upset with these recent changes by Yoast, and they're pushing for things like all-in-one SEO plugin and other things. It's fine
Mm.
if you want to use that plugin. Great, it's not going to hurt you. But I'm a big believer in Yoast. It seems to be the better plugin. So when we talk about that, we want something that's stable. We want something that has good support. We want something that is constantly updated and maintained. I don't
Yeah.
mind saying that that's Yoast. And I will tell you that for years, I never recommended the premium version of Yoast. I thought, waste of time. Totally changed my tune on that about a year ago. Totally changed my
Okay.
tune on that
Yeah.
about a year ago. And the reason I did is because Yoast actually added some functionality that was really pretty damn cool. And one of the functionalities they added was an orphaned content filter. So if you're on the call and you have not upgraded to the Yoast Premium plugin, I love the orphan content filter because I can immediately see at a glance which posts on my site I have not linked to at all. They're basically content islands. They're sitting out there lonely. They weren't
Yeah.
asked to dance. Lots of authority there. None of it is being pushed internally through other sites. That alone is fantastic. So just because of that orphan content filter, I tend to recommend Yoast Premium. And that doesn't even count the fact that there's increased internal linking suggestions now. They've got the built-in redirect manager. You've got the ability to optimize for multiple keywords. You've got the priority support. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
worth it. So Yoast Premium all the way.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I think one thing I will. I mean, look, some people are happy to switch and change.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the way that I look at that is all I can do. All I can do is recommend people not to switch and change too much. I think I see this a lot. I think it's probably one of the big downfalls that people have with WordPress is they're constantly making changes and trying a new plugin or swapping to a different plugin or changing the URLs or changing up their redirects or their homepage message. Or I just think in general, only change things once you've done the analysis, once you see the data that's there that tells you need to make the change. That's what I would say. But you mentioned there about the orphaned content with no internal links, and so we'll go to the next question from James Norquay, who is from Prosperity Media. James is based in Sydney, and his agency won the Agency of the Year award at the Search Marketing Awards last year at the Opera House. So it's great to hear a question from James. The first part of his question has been answered already because he asked about Yoast or Rank Math. Well, we've already kind of answered that. But the second part of his question here leads on from orphan content. He says, for internal links on WordPress sites, do you recommend using an internal link plugin or do it manually? Question mark.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I always, especially with regards to internal linking, I never want to automate that because it can be spammy. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, there was a related links plugin that caused a ridiculous amount of manual action penalties with Google because it was used incorrectly by literally thousands of WordPress users. It would automatically go ahead and find and highlight specific keyword phrases that you specified on the back end, and it went crazy. And the next thing you know, Google started to see all these unnatural internal links pushing anchor text rich keywords, and that was a bad thing, and then it generated penalties. So I'm all about the manual part of it. The good thing about Yoast Premium is it does come up with a related link suggestion on every post, and you can choose to use those suggestions or choose not to. But whenever we automate something like that, it tends to go awry. So I would be very cautious about that.
Yeah, especially because internal links are still counted as links, and if you're starting to pump out heaps of internal links with anchor text, you're
Mhm.
asking for some trouble, right?
Right, very much so.
So let's go on to Leanne, and Leanne has quite a long question here. Let's see if we can. It's to do with if I want to update an old post to target new keywords, keywords with a lower keyword difficulty. Am I right to think I shouldn't change the post title? I know that I don't touch the URL, right? So she's worked it out that you don't want to change your URLs on your post. But if I shouldn't change the post title, then would it be okay to put the new title as a H1 heading on the top of the post? Question mark. There's some examples here about changing titles without changing URLs, and then the question really is, how do you get that headline to punch through once you've changed it, I guess, and do they need a H1? I wonder whether Leanne is thinking too much about that to try and target those lower keyword difficulty. I mean, Casey, what's your thought on this one? Is it getting too far down the rabbit hole trying to go off those lower keywords by changing up the H1?
Well, the H1 is automatically generated by your page post title. So I want to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you're not adding extra H1s just for that reason, because there's no real benefit to doing that. I mean, again, you could, H1 is a deprecated factor. I don't even really consider it a ranking factor anymore. I mean, you could literally have 6 H1s on a page. You'll still rank just fine because it's literally such a small value issue. It's just not semantically correct. That being said, in your example here, I believe that for those of you who can't see the question like we can, let's use an example. She has peanut butter Nutella brownies and she wants to change
Yes.
it to peanut butter brownie recipe as an example. And of course, the URL is peanut butter Nutella brownies. So here's the
Mm.
thing to be aware of is that the URL is such a deprecated ranking factor. I would never even recommend you change it, period. Even if it was the wrong keyword, we wouldn't change it. And Google even says the same thing. He says the Google would rather have you gut an entire post and keep the URL than put up a whole new post and redirect the old post to the new one because you're just resetting everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't
Absolutely.
worry about that. If you wanted to target peanut butter brownie recipe and your URL says peanut butter Nutella brownies, wouldn't lose any sleep over that immediately. Your goal is just to go ahead and re-optimize the post around that focus keyword, and you could easily do that. And then one of the things that you didn't mention at all was how important internal linking is. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
need to go back into your site and find examples where you've been linking to this post, and we need to update those links when possible to reflect these new focus keywords, because those internal signals to that post is going to be very, very important. It's extremely overlooked by the average person when they're updating and republishing content. So you can do this, okay? Just you have to ask yourself, it's really going to be worth your time, especially if there's not going to be a huge increase in those keywords. Because one of the things that no one can see on the call but Peter and I is that you got dates in your URL, lady, and we don't like dates in our URLs. We don't do that. So if I was you, I would go ahead and focus on updating your content, updating your URLs to a future-proofed section where there's no dates. Let's get that done first. And then you could look at updating and republishing content at these same URLs going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like dates in URLs. It makes it very hard to update and republish content.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got another one here from Leanne, but we might just take that as read because we've already covered off a fair bit of information about keyword and tools like Semrush and that sort of thing. So obviously we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, but in traditional Casey Markee style, we're going to go overtime, and we're going to forge ahead and keep going through these questions. We've got a few more yet. So so here's one from Sarah from Wonder Cooks, and Sarah says, "What is Best practice when updating an old post with new keywords that no longer match the original URL. Actually, it's a very similar question.
We've already covered that. So it's
Yeah.
okay. You can change everything. Just don't change the URL if you can help it. It's totally fine. Google, John Mueller even came out less than a year ago and says that we would prefer that you gut the entire page and put up new content as opposed to putting up a new page that you don't need. So do that. Let's try to revitalize the content whenever possible.
Yeah, well, let's go to some of the other questions that have been getting asked while we're, so that's really all the questions that were pre-submitted. I do have another question that was submitted to me personally from Nintin mentioned he's actually running the webinar over at the Indian search marketing webinar, and
oh, fantastic.
so we were chatting. He asked me a lot of questions about, what are the most important topics that people should think about with WordPress SEO? And so he's going to start following up on some of these topics on his webinar as well. And I guess, off the top of your head, Casey, what would you say would be, the top of the list of topics for thinking about WordPress SEO?
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and paste over a note to us real quick because we want to make sure that we get William's question too, since I know that we missed one. So when I'm thinking top of mind, when we're talking top of mind with regards to WordPress, I think I mentioned it before, is that it's very important to have a quality stack in place. That's tier 1 hosting. That's a full bulk image optimization. I like Short Pixel. I think it works great. Making sure that you have a premium caching plugin in place. I like WP Rocket because the built-in lazy loading works great on most issues. And if you have issues, it's always fixable. And then, of course, making sure that we're having quality security plugins like Security Involved or WordFence, and that we have a database optimization plugin. And just making sure that WordPress is set up with best practices. Have a site health plugin installed. I know that they wrapped that into the recent, 5.5 update, so that helps you a little bit. But when we talk about long-term success for WordPress, there's little things that go a long way. Just making sure that you're using a quality theme that's maintained. One of the things that I always look for is, can I optimize category pages? Huge, completely untapped ability for you to generate an extra several thousand clicks, if not a month, a week for some of these larger sites. Category pages are extremely underutilized. They're basically landing pages. They're the windows into the house that is your WordPress block. Tag pages, they're basically doors-to-door salesmen or Hare Krishnas. We don't necessarily want to have them in the house that much. We want to maybe no index those. Totally okay. But category pages are very important because they allow us to showcase our best content. And so one of the things I'm looking for on a theme, can I optimize that category page? Because a lot of themes do not have that built-in functionality. I might be able to go in and specify a custom page style and description, but do I have the ability to go in and add above the fold content? Do I have the ability to add cross-link navigation? Do I have the ability to add any custom schema to that with item list or category list options? Very, very important. So that's what I tend to like about Genesis. Divi, I believe, has that option. There's a couple other themes that allow you to optimize category pages. Big fan of that. So if you're on a WordPress theme, if you're thinking about a redesign, you better be talking to your developer and your designer and say, hey, I need to make sure that I can optimize my category pages, because you would not believe at how many times I've been brought in and told them to scrap what they're doing because they're leaving all of this potential traffic on the table.
Yeah, right. I mean, the other way is then you're talking about editing your theme and getting a developer to give you the functionality to start being able to add that content on your category pages, which now you're starting to talk about extra cost. And
I know.
Thing. So
I'm gonna try to get in there early so we can minimize the cost as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was some more questions here in the chat, and you mentioned here one that you didn't want to miss, which is the question from William Rock. Is that
right there?
Yeah, I mean, there's one here. So if you had a choice for dedicated hosting, who would you suggest? They're saying here about the SLA and support for high CPU type website with the growth only to 100K plus and growing each month. So looking for a long term, had a big outage a month ago and transferred their site to WP Engine growth package. So I mean, I'm guessing William Rock's had a good experience since going to WP Engine, but of course he is a little bit gun shy now, I guess, because once you have had a big outage and you do know the pain of your site being offline with thousands of visitors not being able to see your content. What's the answer? What do you think, Casey?
So I'm a big fan of a Linode setup on Cloudways. Linode setup on Cloudways. I'm going to go ahead and paste it over right now. And I'll tell you here, not only is it cheaper than you're going to find most everywhere else, but it doesn't go down. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I've had an issue with the Linode server. Now, I occasionally also recommended Vultr, which is also one of the really cool options that they have over there along with AWS. But Vultr has gone down a couple of times. But I tell you, I don't usually ever run into any issues with Linode. So that is honestly what I recommend for a lot of bloggers. Now, here's the issue, is that Cloudways has pretty piss poor customer service. They're based in Cyprus. The prices are low and they lease out all of their space, but the competitive rates are there. And, you know, as long as you have some experience with regards to managing your own migrations and things like that, you're going to be in relatively good hands. The sites don't go down a lot at all. So, I mean, I have my sites hosted through Cloudways, not a problem. Very pleased with it. So if you have the ability to, you know, again, if you know how to do a site migration, you can make sure that you follow them and make sure that they're not adding an unnecessary chain redirect or any of that other nonsense. A Linode server over at Cloudways is a pretty good investment, especially for your site. We've got sites over there running 500,000 to 8 million sessions a month. They're doing fine.
So there's some homework for people to do. I mean, this sort of thing, yeah, it's not a straightforward thing. Moving your site, I mean, you're going to want to engage a professional to help you move, all that sort of thing. So let's go to. There's some more questions. I think we'll have these last few questions, and then we'll call it quits. But there's one here from Naveed Chowdhury. And I guess the question here is to do with Moz. How do you deal with keywords with a high priority on Moz, but also have a difficulty score with medium organic CTR? I mean, I don't. Yeah, I would say. What do you think, Casey? It sounds a bit. Might be thinking too much here about high priority scores and the
You know,
thing
where
of the
is
like.
this? Did you paste over this question? Was it submitted?
It's in the chat here, Casey. Naveed, if you look at that on our internal group chat here,
Okay, I see
and
it.
you can see
So so
it's
Naveed,
organic
how do you deal with high
CTR.
keywords with high priority in Moz? Moz is just a tool. That's it. As I tell everyone all the time, maybe what they determine as high priority is a necessary high priority. It's just
You
also
need
be
to.
aware that just like with SEMrush, you guys realize that SEMrush, as great tools as they are, they don't have access to the Google API. It costs too much. So if you want to see things like keyword difficulty, or if you want to see things like accurate costs on competition and how many searches a month, download something like Keywords Everywhere, which is a free add-on to your browser that actually has access to the Google API. Most of these big tool sets, including Moz, do not have access. They're all guesstimates. So in your case here, your question is, how do you deal with keywords with high priority but also have high difficulty score at the medium level organic CTR? Do we take them? Not unless you're a strong
Yeah,
site. And unless I have more information, there's no other way for me to answer that. So you
yeah,
have to determine whether or not you're competitive against the sites that are above you. So one of the things that you might want to do, download and install the SEO Quake toolbar, and also download and install the Moz toolbar, overlay those results on the SERPs and see exactly
yeah,
who's above you, and then determine that, use that data to determine whether or not you can even be competitive based upon your question.
yeah. So, and can I add to what you're saying too?
Please, Peter.
Which is simply, what I'm a big fan of is do your research. You know, you're not just looking at one tool, exactly what you said, Casey, but I'm saying, you know, add these things up, you know, spend the time, you know, do your own research, put them into your spreadsheets. And there's plenty of ways of doing keyword research, but don't just look at one tool, one result. What Insight Online says, what do you think were the major issues in the June 3 algorithm update? Well, some of the things that I saw myself were Google's increased awareness of PBN backlinks or spammy, low quality links. Also, what I saw is just general quality of content and trust factors, again, with the trust factors of that content. But also what I saw myself was massive, was to do with mobile page speed. And so they're the three things that I noticed. But Casey, what did you notice any trends in particular that seem to be happening from that update?
And we're talking about the most recent update from last week, or the update from June the 3rd?
This one's June 3, the question is here.
Okay. So with regards to that update, you know, this is a core update. So it's basically building upon and refining some of the signals that happened during the March update from earlier this year. When Google runs these core updates, there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of different things being addressed. It's never just one thing. And so whenever you hear about, oh my God, this one had link factors, or this one had page speed factors, or this one was rating EAT, or the lack of expertise, they're just guesses. For us to say any otherwise would be incorrect. What we're trying to say is that when Google pushes these core updates down, they're on a plethora of factors. That's why a site audit is so important. We want to go ahead and take a fine-tooth comb to your site. We want to run a couple crawlers against it. Is there topical dilution issues? Are there any noticeable chain redirects internally? Do you have a lot of issues with the server? Do we have pages that are just hanging up? Do we have page speed issues? Is there content cannibalization issues going on? It's never just one thing. So when I say what you should focus on, I would focus on getting a site audit. That's what I would say, because without us determining what is happening with your site, we can't offer confirmed advice. So when we've had bloggers who are suffering from this, I don't give them any generic advice. I will look at their site, and because I'm a site auditor, I will immediately see 100 things wrong with it, because that's just what I do 24/7 every day, 365 days a year, is look at sites and find issues. And so hopefully I pulled out enough of the issues that we can correct to increase the root quality of the site in the eyes of Google, because anything we can do to make the site more algorithmically pleasing, the faster it's going to recover when there's a next update. And this is important for everyone on the call, folks. If you've been affected by a core update, you can get improvement between the core updates by making your site better, but you won't have any real improvement until Google reruns the algorithm. That's the whole point of these core updates. So eventually they'll run something else. Okay.
So absolutely, Casey, and this is why I think people need to, in general, you can say generally what are the things, but because every website needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis, and as you were saying, this is where your audit. Now, of course, audit is a fancy word for analysis. And really what you're doing is getting a professional who understands this stuff and looks at it day in and day out to actually go in and do the analysis to figure out what is happening. So which has to happen on an individual basis. You can't tar any of the websites with the same brush. Deborah Cruz says, which lazy load plugin would you recommend? I would say my answer to that is that it's personal preference. Again, there's lots of them. Some themes have lazy loads built into the themes. There's a stack of good ones. Do you have a favorite, Casey, that you like using?
So the lazy loading that's built into WP Rocket is exceptional, and you can even get it separately. I believe that you can actually go in and install the WP Rocket lazy loading separately, so that's fine. Another one that you might want to consider if you have issues with the WP Rocket lazy loading, and some blogs do, is called A3 lazy loading. So A3 lazy loading is also an exceptional plugin, and that works pretty well. Also, Lucy's on the call. Lucy, your check is in the mail. Thank you very much. I'm glad that the audit experience was so fine. For those of you on the call, again, just want to warn you now, 2019 is completely full, so I'm booking audits for 2020 now. So don't bombard me with requests for audits, because I'll have to send you off to a competent person like Peter or someone else. So just an FYI on
that. Yeah. So look, let's have our last question. I know there's plenty more, but we have to stop somewhere, right?
Absolutely.
And it's probably a good one. I mean, your time is valuable, and we really appreciate your time, Casey. But we're giving all our viewers and everyone on the call here the best amount of time from us to get the most out of it. So the last question here is probably a good one to end on, from Matt McGregor. If I'm about to start a new blog, what do I focus on first? Wow, that's the golden question.
You're starting a new blog, so you know what? Quality theme. There's a lot of them out there. So first of all, I wouldn't use anything custom. I'm against that. I'm not a big believer in a custom theme, because custom themes result in custom headaches down the road. So if you can find a quality theme that is constantly maintained, that loads fast, that is responsive, that, again, has a good reputation. Studio Press, which is now owned by WP Engine, has a lot of exceptional themes on the Genesis framework. You could also look at something like, look at the framework there. Bootstrapped is another great framework that works well on WordPress. Maybe you'd be looking at something like Divi or Avada, the Bootstrap starter. You can get WordPress plus Bootstrap 4. Those work well together. Something along those lines. But the less customizations you do on your blog, probably the better long term, because I can't tell you how many audits I've done where the bloggers have relied on a built-in theme, a built-in recipe functionality, or some kind of built-in schema that's horribly outdated. We've had to rip it all out, or they've wanted functionality that they couldn't add because of how the theme was designed. So just be aware that if you can use an existing framework, that's always probably the best advice I can give you to start. And search for our names. Search for Casey Markee. Search for Peter Mead. Search for WordPress SEO tutorials. We publish a lot of free resources. Those go into suggested plugins. Sign up for a solid support plan. Look for someone like Andrew Wilder with nerdpress.net, Grayson Bell with iMark Interactive. Look at Arsen Rabinovich with Blog Tech Tutors. All of them provide superior long-term WordPress support, because this is a business. Invest in yourself. Work with the best people you can. Invest in the best plugins and the themes you can. That'll save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yes, there are more questions. We can't stay here all day, but we will be back. Casey has more webinars coming up, and I have more coming up in the future. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and your advice. And it's always, things are moving, shaking, changing in the world of WordPress and SEO all the time. So how do people stay in contact with you and stay up to date? Should they follow your Twitter or your LinkedIn? What's the best channel for people to stay in contact?
That's a good question. If you want a lot of irreverent humor, a lot of jokes about how my wife locks me out of the house, tries to feed me ridiculous salads, you can follow me on Facebook. I'll go ahead and paste that over a little bit as well. Or you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter. That's MediaWise on Twitter. And we'll go ahead and paste that over as well. But I wish all of you the very best. Again, I wish we could talk about WordPress stuff all day, but usually we can't. And if you're on the call and you are looking for a speaker who can completely underdeliver, that's me. And if you want to fly me 18 and a half hours to Australia so that I can really see for myself that kangaroos and foxes overrun the city of Melbourne at night, and that it's like, what is it? It's like Mad Max at night. And I want to see that. I want to see that. That's something.
Splendor of the kangaroos and foxes down the street.
Exactly.
Thank you so much again. Have a great day. And everyone, thanks for joining for the Australian Search Community.